Speaking of this weekend, Jordan, SMU comes to town, 3:30 p.m. kick. It's going to be on the ACC network. Clemson has not played well in the Valley, Jordan, as of late. It has been a struggle for them at home. I'm not so sure we have very much of a home field advantage at this point, just judging by how the Tigers have played lately at home. Seems like they play better away from home right now than they do at home. But they're going to try to see if they can get that turned around this weekend against SMU. Obviously, a rematch of the ACC championship game. Again, these are two very different teams than played in the ACC championship game last year. SMU lost a ton of guys, but they have replaced it nicely. Their offense is kind of humming along this year. Clemson obviously has stumbled out of the gate, seems to have gathered herself in the past couple weeks, playing some inferior opponents in the ACC. And now we got this head-to-head matchup in the Valley. Jordan, your initial thoughts on this matchup with SMU coming to town with their, obviously their dynamic offense, their dynamic quarterback that they will be bringing into town.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting matchup for Clemson for a lot of reasons. SMU, for a lot of the reasons they were last year, offensively, I mean, the thing that jumps out to you is speed in all aspects of the game. They do everything fast. Yeah. They are in the 100, I believe they are 118th in the country in terms of average time of possession, not because they are just not, they don't score points and you get a bunch of 3 outs. It's because they score so fast and they run so many plays right, that they don't possess the ball that often. So they are fast in that way, and they are just fast in general. This team is one of the faster teams in terms of team speed that you'll see offensively. Between their quarterbacks, their receivers, their backs, everybody can run. And that's the thing that's going to stress this defense. And one of the things that I think this defense over the past few years has struggled has been facing teams with really, really great team speed that can stress them sideline to sideline. Clemson has always been more of a downhill, vertical and then an inside out type of defense where they want to control the middle of the field and play downhill. But if you ask them to defend the sideline, sideline to sideline, it can get a little tricky, getting some of their, weaker athletes out in space. So, that's the thing that jumps out to me when I watch this SMU offense. Rhett Lashley has been doing it at a high level for a long time as a coordinator and now as a head coach. And they are going to throw a lot at you. That's really what it is. A lot of formations, a lot of motion, and they're going to a lot of misdirection, and they're going to do whatever it takes to get their athletes the ball out in space, and they do it very, very effectively. I already mentioned Kevin Jennings and what he means as a runner, but he's certainly an effective passer as well, and so he gives you a true dual threat kind of capability there. And their skill position guys are really, really strong. They're led receiver-wise. They're led by Romello Brinson. If that name sounds familiar, a transfer from Miami. That's a theme on SMU over the last couple of years. But he's been they're kind of their number one guy. Tight end RJ Maryland is a really, really dynamic athlete. I think he's still kind of coming along the season. He tore his ACL last year. He's coming off of that, but he's a very, very effective weapon at tight end. And I'm sure that if you guys have been on social media, you've probably seen the highlights of Chris Johnson Jr. Once a Clemson running back target, now at SMU after a little bit of time at Miami. He might be the fastest player you play all year. He is true track speed, breakaway speed, whatever you want to call it. He's averaging 8.1 yards per carry this season. He's not their number one back in terms of carries, but he is the most explosive by a good margin. So this team has a lot of skill. And offensive line wise, I think they've done a good job replacing it, even though they've had some guys leave the program for over last season. I don't think they're great by any means, but I think they do really well with what they're asked to do. And with the way that SMU runs their offense, they don't have to block for very long because they are doing a lot to get the ball out in space and then taking shots when it presents itself, the opportunity presents itself. So that's where if there's one side of the ball that in this matchup that really has me concerned and keeping a close eye on, it's this offense and how they match up against Clemson's defense. I do think that they have some really, really dynamic athletes, and that worries me with just the style of defense and the type of players Clemson has on defense.
Yeah, definitely. The thing that pops out for SMU is speed, right? You kind of led with that. It's speed, it's their playmakers, and it really starts with their quarterback, Kevin Jennings. That guy's a dynamic quarterback. He's a guy that could create out in space. Clemson's going to have to be very careful and not overrush him because he will get out in the open and he will do some damage on the ground. That's something that Clemson has struggled with in the past, is letting these quarterbacks kind of escape the pocket and be able to create out in space, whether that be with their legs or keeping their eyes downfield and hitting a big pass because, the receiver works themselves open on a scramble drill. One of the big things with this offense is they are explosive, right? They're an offense that comes in averaging 35 points a game. They're averaging over 270 yards passing per game, over 130 yards on the ground per game. So it's definitely an offense that can get it done both ways, and an offense that you're going to have to be really prepared for. You're going to have to be disciplined in your you're going to have to be gap sound, rush with discipline in your lanes, not get over your skis on that, because again, Kevin Jennings will make this defense pay if they rush past him. And he sees a lane to do damage on the ground. He will absolutely do that. He can also do it through the air. He can spin it. So Jordan, what does Clemson's defense have to do well in this matchup in order to limit this explosive SMU offense in the Valley this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of laid it out. I mean, you have to be. I mean, first of all, I mean, you have to your eye discipline. It's got to be at a really high level. I mean, you got to be well prepared. You got to trust what you see, and trust your eyes, because they're going to throw a lot at you just to get you out of alignment, and out of position, and with Clemson and the guys that they have out on the outside. They're going to try to take advantage of some of the deficiencies Clemson has, long speed wise. So they're going to run, a lot of screens. They're going to make your corners come down and be effective in the screen game and make tackles. So you're going to have to make some open field tackles, corners especially, and certainly the safeties are going to have to help as well. It's going to have to be a team effort, of course, but they're really going to spread you out and make sure that they can get as many advantageous matchups one-on-one as possible. So I really think that it's really about trusting your eyes in this game, and also if you're the defensive line, you want to be aggressive, but you also can't let Kevin Jennings beat you with his legs. And
Right.
he hasn't run a ton this year, but he can. He is very capable.
Yeah.
They haven't really had to use his legs as much, and I think they've certainly wanted to develop him as a pocket passer, but he certainly has that in him. And with these dynamic backs that they can use out of the backfield and that have that explosiveness along with their receivers and tight ends, they can hit you at all angles. Essentially, it's a very, very complete offense, and so it's going to be difficult. And I'm interested to see how this team is prepares for it. And with the past couple of weeks not playing teams that were certainly limited offensively, it's a whole different ball game here. I mean, this is going to be a true test on whether or not they've really figured some things out defensively.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a big test for the Tigers this weekend, and like we said, we're going to find out how much they figure things out, how much they have improved. It's going to kind of be one of those things. As you mentioned, this is an offense that likes to play with a lot of tempo. What's the best way to negate an offense that likes to play with tempo? Get them behind the sticks, right? Don't allow them to be successful on first and second downs. Get them into second and long, third and long situations, and then you'll negate a lot of that tempo that they want to play with and a lot of that speed that they're going to try to use in order to gash your defense and create explosive plays. So that's going to be a big test for the Tigers this weekend. I'm sure Tom Allen's going to have a good plan for that. But kind of switching gears to the SMU defense versus our Clemson Tigers offense. What have you kind of seen from them this year, and what can the Tigers expect from SMU defensively?
Yeah, this defense is as feast or famine as it gets. I think in college football, when you look at it, they are going to be very hyper aggressive up front. They're going to send a lot of blitzes, a lot of blitz packages. The one thing that's been consistent this year is they clearly don't have guys on the back end that can really, compensate for that style of play. SMU is 135th in all of college football in pass defense. They give up just over 315 yards per game, and it's not very. That's not very good. If I need to tell you that. So they have been. They have been very vulnerable to the pass this year, kind of by nature of how they play defense. I think they've lost some guys from last year that I think they probably had more trouble replacing than maybe they even thought. But the one thing that is really good about this defense, I do think their front four is pretty good. They are 19th. I'm sorry, not 19th. They are 10th nationally in sacks with 19 sacks on the season. So they are going to sell out for tackles for loss. If that tells you anything, they are, like I said, they are very feast or famine. They want to get tackles for loss at the expense of potentially giving up explosive plays. That's why I think this could be a big day for Kade Clubnik if he's feeling good, and the receivers are on the same page. There will be some opportunities on the back end to make plays. But it's can the O-line protect, because this SMU defensive line is pretty good. They have it's a pretty transfer heavy defensive line, but a couple of those guys have been in the program for a little bit now. Cameron Robertson, he's tied for the team lead in sacks with 5. He's probably their best pass rusher off the edge. But on the interior, Jeffrey Mba is a load to deal with as well. He's a very, very physical force, tough to, I saw him against Stanford literally just shake off a double team for a sack. You basically throw 2 guys off to the side for a sack. So, he's a very, very good player. I mean, this defensive line is very good. So I do think that that's going to be the biggest thing for this defense this offensive line and the pass protection in general to hold up. I think there will be opportunities to be had on this defense, because they are going to send a lot of pressure. They are going to sell out for tackles for loss, and that leaves their defensive backs, who I don't think are particularly great, very vulnerable to the big play. So, I think the game plan is pretty simple. I think you'll see Clemson throw the ball a lot more this game. But, establishing the run is still important. And, I think that, you've done good things when you've gotten Adam Randall to football. So whether it's, even if it's not, in the traditional run game, using him out of the backfield like you've seen the last couple of weeks, it's been really effective. And there have been some plays, there have been opportunities for big plays when you've done that. So, I think the game plan for the offense is simple. I think there will be opportunities for plays. You just gotta hit them. And I think this SMU defense is probably better than 135th. They are 66th in yards per play, so that's not great, but it's considerably better they're considerably better on a down-to-down basis than the total defense would suggest. But they are, like I said, they are very susceptible to the pass. So you do want to, take advantage of those opportunities when they present themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's going to be a test for the offensive line this week, right? You mentioned kind of their sack leaders there, Smith and Robertson. Those are kind of their big sack guys so far this season. One's got 2.5, one's got 4.5 sacks on the season. So again, going to be a big test for Clemson's protection, right? The offensive line is going to have to stand up, play big. I'm assuming Braden Jacobs is going to be starting at left tackle again in this game, and we're going to find out whether he just had a good game or he's truly taken that next step and he's ready to step into a bigger role on that offensive line. So be looking for him on Cade's blind side there. The running backs are going to have to get involved in the protection there. But like you said, if Clemson's protection can hold up, there are plays to be made on the back end of that defense. There are explosive plays. You got, name the receiver that can exploit that secondary if Cade gets time, right? So Cade's going to have to trust his protection, step up into the pocket, trust what he's seeing. Like to see some leaning a little bit heavier on the traditional running game this week and not so much the quarterback running game. Get significant carries for Randall there, get some carries for Eazy-E and Gideon Davison there as well, and then get your playmakers the ball out in open space like you have done successfully for the past 2 weeks, right? Give Cade some quick reads, give Cade some quick passes, lean on that defense a little bit, and then the big plays I think will come off of things like that. So. That's how I would attack it if I was Clemson's offensive coordinator. Again, I'm not an X's and O's guys. I'm not an offensive coordinator, so I'm sure Garrett Riley's going to have a great plan for that. But definitely a bigger test this week for the Tigers than they have had in the past couple weeks.
100%. This team is going to tell us a lot, and we talk about the recent home record. Clemson is 7-6. In their last 13 games against Power 4 opponents at home. That's since the loss to South Carolina in 2022. They are 7-6 against Power 4 opponents at home.
That's pitiful. That
is pitiful. Shout out to Larry Williams over at Tiger Illustrated for that stat. That was very sobering when I read it, and it tells you a lot about kind of how far this team has fallen in terms of just getting up for these home games, because I really don't think, I can't blame the Clemson fan base. I think they've showed out. I still think, Memorial Stadium is a tough venue to play at, and they do a great job at making it a tough venue to play at. But the team's got to show up. The team, Dabo said, in the week, he said, teams aren't just going to come in here and bow down. You can't. That's not how this works. You don't. Stadiums don't win football games. Football teams do. And the football team has to show up.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Clemson's got an amazing environment. They have an incredible crowd. They got an incredible atmosphere. It's loud. It's a tough place to play. But when your product on the field sucks and your team's not playing well, it doesn't matter how loud the fans are. It doesn't matter how many people you can pack into a stadium. The team's just not playing well. So hopefully Clemson looks to rectify that this coming weekend versus the SMU Mustangs and get a second win since SMU joined the ACC. Jordan, last thing I want to talk about before we move on from the SMU preview and kind of move on to the rest of the show is Kade Clubnik and his health. I know we've mentioned it a couple of times, but this is a big deal. If you're a Clemson Tiger fan, Kade Clubnik's health this week is a huge deal. It's going to affect this game massively one way or another. I know Dabo Swinney seems to, all the questions asked in the media and his interviews are, Kade Klubnik's going to be fine. What are your gut feeling, your thoughts? Do you think Cade's going to be healthy? Do you think it'll affect the game plan in any way? Just kind of how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I think it is going to some degree at least affect how much they run him. if he's really not feeling, if it's still lingering at least a little bit, at game time. It's tough to say, now, but they seem optimistic, but I really do think this is going to be a game where Cade's going to have to win a lot from within the pocket, and that does scare me a little bit.
A little
I'm
bit.
not gonna lie.
It's a little concerning.
Yeah,
it's a little concerning. I do think his mobility will be hampered in this game. I think hands down, everyone knows that, right? Now, Dabo did allude to the fact that he has already been dealing with a sore ankle for a couple weeks now. That's why it's taped up heavily. So I have no doubts that he's going to play in this game. They'll probably tape it up very heavily. I hope that they lean a little bit heavier on the traditional running game and let Kade Clubnik just be a quarterback back there. Not that he can't run. I know he's going to run some. I just would like to see him run a little bit less in this game than he has in previous games. And hopefully that ankle holds up because, again, if we have to turn to the bench when it comes to the quarterback position, we might be in trouble in this game. We might be in trouble. All right, Jordan, we've broke down the game. We talked about offense. We talked about defense. We talked about Kade Clubnik's health. We talked about game plans and everything in between. But now it is time for a score prediction. It's time to lock it in. Not that we're very good at score predictions at this point. I think this might be our worst season yet, Jordan, when it comes to score predictions. But we won't blame ourselves on that. That's obviously a Clemson problem. They're not doing their part most of the time. And that's why we get our score predictions wrong. That's what I'm sticking to. So it's not our fault. It's Clemson's fault. So, but anyways, the line, it opened up at 8.5. It is now up to 9.5. The over-under is at 54.5.
All right.
You guys, while Jordan is about to make his score prediction, go ahead and lock your score predictions in the chat now so that you can be wrong along with us when inevitably Clemson makes me and Jordan wrong yet again.
Yeah. Man, I've gone into this game and, with a lot of mixed feelings because, there is a lot of reasons, maybe to think that, this team has started to, turn a corner a little bit offensively and defensively. But, the optics of it being against two really bad football teams is really, really tough to shake, knowing how this team has scaled up against better opponents as of late. Clemson is a 9.5 point favorite, whatever it is now.
9.5. It's a lot of points. It's a lot of points.
It's a lot of points for a team that has not played well at home and is against more competent, their most competent P4 opponents. They have lost, and they've lost by double digits in one of them. So this game has made me uncomfortable for a while because I do think that SMU's offense might give this defense some problems. And, my question is this going to be a game where it turns into a track meet and Clemson, is able to take advantage of SMU's vulnerabilities on the back end? Or is this a game where Clemson is playing from behind because SMU they were the more prepared team out the jump? They maybe hit Clemson with a big play or whatever, what have you, kind of similar to Syracuse, where they just kind of go up and down the field early in the football game. That kind of worries me. Turnovers, I think, will definitely play a factor in this. SMU has, they've turned the ball over in every football game except for last week. So I do think that if this defense, if Clemson can generate turnovers like they did, last week and, like they did against SMU last year, that could go a long way towards, maybe potentially weathering the early storm. Because so far this season, SMU has been the better football team out the gate in terms of opening opening drive scripts and things like that. So if you go down, if say SMU gets the ball first and they go right down the field and score, like how does this team respond? So getting off to a good start and slowing down SMU and maybe preventing them from having a strong start could go a long way. But again, this is a matchup that really kind of befuddles me a little bit because I really don't know what I'm going to get out of SMU defensively, and I think that's going to tell us a lot about where what this final score ends up being. I think SMU is going to win the football game. Now, before people freak out on me and say that Jordan, you're delusional, or not delusional, Jordan, you're just being a negative Nancy, you're just hating. I'm not going to let this football team fool me. I'm not going to give them the opportunity. If I'm going to want to be proven wrong, because so far in recent results against these caliber of opponents, Clemson has not answered the bell. They just haven't. And I do think SMU scares me enough, offensively, where I do think they'll score points in this game. And I'm worried about Clemson, consistently putting together offense, even with the vulnerabilities SMU has on defense. Has Clemson's offensive line found found a starting five that they can rely on? Braden Jacobs, obviously last week was, over the weekend was a really, really nice revelation and played extremely well. But can he continue that against a far better defensive front? I don't know. Can this offensive line in general hold up? Will Kade Clubnik's limitations potentially because of the injury affect how Garrett Riley calls this football game, and in turn affect how effective they are? I don't know. I don't think Clemson gets blown out. I don't think this is like a Syracuse type of thing where it's non-competitive. I think it's going to be a good football game. I'm going to take SMU to win the football game, 33-27.
All right, 33-27. SMU wins the game, according to Jordan. I'll tell you what. I have a very similar score prediction, but I'll get to who I'm going to pick to win this game in a minute. My kind of thoughts heading into this game is this is an opportunity for Clemson to prove that they have truly figured some things out on offense and defense, just as a whole, as a team, that they've started to turn the corner into being somewhat of a better football team than the way they started the first 4 games of this season. Is that going to happen? I don't know. It's a big question mark. Kade Clubnik's health scares me because we've seen what's behind him, and it's not good. So if Kade Clubnik does not play in this football game or is not able to complete this football game, Clemson's in trouble. Clemson will lose this football game if Kade Clubnik cannot go or goes out early in this game, hands down. The other thing that scares me is SMU's offense, their tempo, their explosiveness. I know, the quarterback hasn't run for a ton of yards this season, but something tells me that he's going to gash Clemson on the ground. Something tells me he's going to gash this Clemson team on the ground. We've seen it far too many times with this Clemson team, and although he hasn't run, I think he's run for like 5 yards on the season. He's probably going to run for like 60 yards in this game. That's just the way I feel about it. So I'm very worried about their offense, and I'm worried about our offense because of the health of Kade Clubnik. With that said, I'm going to roll with the Tigers. It's going to be a close game. Clemson's defense is going to have to stand up late in order to shut down SMU and salt away the victory. I'm going to go Tigers 31, SMU 27.
I like it. I like it. I like it. So I think this is the first game this year that we've been split in terms of the result. So
It is. It is.
yeah, we both thought
I'm
all the other
probably
games.
going to regret that.
Yeah,
But we'll see. Hopefully the Tigers can make me right.
yeah. At the very least, someone will gain some separation in terms of the correct win-loss prediction, because we were in lockstep on every other game. We both thought they'd beat LSU. We got Troy right.
We
Woo.
got Troy right. We got the other three wrong.
Yeah.
And then obviously we got UNC and BC right, but those weren't very hard to predict.
No.
Those football teams were not very good. BC for different reasons than UNC, but the fact still remains they're not great football teams.
Yeah.
But you are playing a good football team this Saturday. So we will see what Clemson does this Saturday. Jordan's score prediction, 33-27 SMU. My score prediction, 31-27 Clemson.